Welcome to a Reddit Bytes production, the best Reddit channel on YouTube. If you subscribe right now, I will give you a cookie. If you don't, that's cool too. Enjoy the show. Today's AskReddit post, sex workers of Reddit. Have any of you ever have a close friend or anyone you normally interact with daily be a surprise customer? What was the experience like, and how did it affect your interactions with them? Oh boy, this is gonna be a good one. Let's get started. There was a girl I went to high school with who was basically a walking stereotype. She fit so well into the archetypal ditzy blonde mold that you might swear it was an act if you didn't know better. She was also f-king mean. This girl was a power BTCH and wasn't really nice to anybody as far as I'm able to remember. People orbited her because she was hot and had everything. She never really bothered me because I did my best to be invisible, but the handful of interactions I ever had with her left me feeling unpleasant. Turns out she wound up being a pretty lucrative stripper later in life. I bought a lap dance from her, and while being nice is part of the job, it really did feel like in those brief few minutes that she did have a genuine personality shift. She was way more laid back. You could even hear it in her voice. She even commented about how she wasn't a BTCH like I used to be, and I have nicer tits. It was a genuinely fun interaction. She seemed happier in comparison to the person I remembered. I was not a sex worker at all, but I was a fine art model for a college for a while. There were so many people that I went to high school with that entered those classes over the 2 years I worked there. Usually they wouldn't say anything and I wouldn't say anything, and I would just get naked and pose for 3 hours lol. Sometimes we would chat after, but sometimes we would ignore each other and pretend it didn't happen. Somewhat related, me and buddy, Tom, go to this sleazy strip club in different part of town. As soon as we walk in, he sees bartender he went to high school with who say, "Tom, you perv. What are you doing here?" Right, double quotation mark. Should have came back with the same question. LOL, my ex was a stripper and begged me to come see her years after we split. Does that count? I was a stripper back in the day. Halfway through a stage show realized that my flatmate's brother and his friends were there. That's how I was outed. LOL. Nothing much changed. Not a sex worker, but found out a girl from high school that I had a crush on was a stripper. It was my buddy's bachelor party. We load up in a van and head about an hour away to a better strip club. We get in and settle at a table. About 30 minutes in, I get to tap on the shoulder and this SIS chick hops in my lap. She calls me by the nickname I had in high school and hugs me. She was always tomboyish in high school, never wore makeup, always competed well in gym, kinda nerdy, quiet, and reserved, but always very pretty if you thought about it. I didn't recognize her for a full minute. It was a fun reunion. It was a full nude spot and she gave no FCKS during her stage performance. Really seeing everything. I really should have tried to pursue it in HS, but I was a dumbass back then. TL. DR, she was a stripper and gave one hell of a show. Man, that's how it is. The ones you pine over in high school, well, that's when they peaked. The girls you won't actively pursue, absolute rockets after high school. Other way around. When I turned 22 or 23 for my birthday, we went out drinking and ended up at a strip club. Stripper was making her rounds on stage to everyone sitting at the pit. She jumped on me and says my name excitedly. Only then I realized it was an employee of mine. Made sense why she couldn't work nights. I was at a lifestyle club and hung out with the couples that I did a club orientation with. The guy of one of the couples ran into the secretary at his work and she was in a fishnet but distracting. I don't know how that next Monday went. LOL, I'm sure they were discreet. I'm a stripper. My friend's dad came in. I hadn't seen him or my friend since high school. I accidentally asked him for a lap dance before I could tell who it was. He said no and I realized who it was as I walked away. He came in a few more times and avoided eye contact with me. When I was on stage he would look away. Another story. My first day as a stripper, I saw two guys from my high school. We chatted, then they both paid for lap dances. This exact thing happened at my bachelor party. It was funny. My friend's dad had coached the stripper while on his daughter's soccer team. They had a pleasant chat and she went on to other patrons. Not a sex worker, but know a couple current former who have worked in brothels, and they could see clients when they entered and choose not to come meet them if they recognized them or if they just didn't feel like working at that moment. so it didn't usually happen. But on the other hand, a friend of mine slept with another friend of mine in exactly this way. She didn't mind him knowing and he didn't mind paying. Sounds like they should just skip the middleman and arrange a deal. Haha. I didn't have a surprise customer, but I do have friends that turned into customers as well. Mostly for just pictures, but I do have the occasional hottle date with some of them. They're all pretty chill about it actually. When I was a cam girl, I would have many guys message me saying they were my cousin or something. They were not, just trying to play out a fetish and I wasn't into it. So then one day a guy, in the main chat, said that he knew me and his name was AJ, fake name. I was like, yeah right, I've only ever known one AJ, if it's true what's my name? And sure enough he put my real first name right there in the chat. We were in youth group in church together almost a decade before that. He became a regular. That happened with me and my estranged older half brother once when I was camming. I messaged him on Facebook to confirm and we had a good laugh about it. I was in the process of booking with a sex worker and she sent me a few face pics that she didn't post in her ad. That's when I realized she was actually my cousin. I politely told her that I couldn't meet and never said anything to anyone, including her. Not a SW, but I was in a lifestyle site that was pretty much local to my state. My cousins who were on there wanted to exchange photos. Their initials, age and location concluded that it was them. I just blocked them from contacting me. How does one even find sex workers? This is a mystery to me because this was like when I was kid and didn't know where to find weed. When I was kid and didn't know where to find weed, I still don't. Get a part-time job in any kitchen. You'll practically start tripping over it. Attending a bachelor party a long time ago, the stripper came in, said hello, and went to the bathroom to fix herself up. She peeked out the door and called one of them over. Turns out, she went to high school with us, a couple of years younger. She called a friend to replace her and she left. Based off of this and many other comments in the thread, I'm gonna say being a stripper in the town you grew up in is not a good idea, LMAO. Honestly, if you do stripper work, sex work in the same place you grew up in, and you're surprised if you run into people you know, then you're just naive, LOL. If you wanna stay anonymous, you gotta move far away. I had a classmate who was a stripper and she was very open about loving it when people she knew came to see her at work and let her dance for them. She thought it was intimate in a fun, friendly way. I was talking to a stripper. She said she had grown up in a suburb about an hour away and used to strip there. She said that ultimately there were too many guys from her high school who came in. I thought the point of being a stripper was that nobody came in. Not exactly someone I knew well, but I went on a Tinder date with a guy. Went to see a movie, nothing exciting. Nice enough guy but no chemistry at all, so didn't stay in contact. Opened my hotel door to my client one night to see him standing there. Didn't react to the fact that I knew him because there's not a single person who knows what I do. Spent the entire booking telling me how sad he was we never caught up again and how he knew it was me when he saw my photos. Photos were blurred and face cropped out, but I've got distinguishing hair. And how it must be fate. Played dumb the whole time because this guy knew my actual identity and eventually asked him to leave because of how uncomfortable his behavior was making me. All he had to do was shut his mouth, LMAO. I don't really qualify as a sex worker. I'm a guy who FCKS women on camera for porn producers, so I'm not paid and I don't have customers. But one time I showed up to a shoot for a blow bang and ran into the guy who owned and operated the CrossFit place I went to. We acknowledged the connection on the set and performed our roles, but basically never spoke of it again and resumed our normal trainer-customer dynamic after that. He was married at the time, but I think they were open, not that it was any business of mine. You did get paid? Not a sex worker, but delivered a pizza to a known sex worker, and at the same moment I was about to knock on the door, a relative opens the door and watches me holding the pizza up to him. I couldn't do anything but laugh. He laughed too, maybe out of embarrassment, and as soon as the sex worker understood what was going on, she also started laughing. Never mentioned this moment to anyone who knows my relative, and he is grateful for that to this day. How grateful. We surprised a friend from university that was working at a strip club to pay for her studies. She just noticed us, winked at us and did her show as usual. Zero FCKS of any kind. were given by anyone. I had a friend at uni that was a stripper. I only found out because she got really drunk one night and told me. I always wondered how she managed to never get found out, but apparently it's 'cause students are always broke and can't afford it. If they ever do, it tends to be on a holiday abroad or a stag do, not in their uni town. It wasn't really a secret that she was a stripper even before we went to see her perform. Her closer friends and roommates knew. Used to be a sex worker, ended up in an appointment with my best friend's dad. Didn't figure it out until I was telling my friend about the very awkward guy and her face went pale. I put 2 and 2 together pretty quickly and changed the subject. So had her dad earlier told her about the very awkward sex worker? We were heavy into drugs. She would basically act like a pimp, and that's how I got started. When she was strapped for cash, she would hook him up with girls she knew. I got tired of giving her a cut, so I branched off myself. I needed a ride to get a couple bags and offered her one if she'd take me. I never met her dad. They obviously had an estranged relationship. He previously hit her up and she couldn't find anyone. He found me on Backpage. A guy that works with my mom found out I sold nudes, and not only did he buy some, he also sent me $50 every month to treat myself. We got a call to a club for head injury. We get there, there was some yelling going on in the private booth. The bouncer comes over telling us the guy is in said booth. Turns out he has a broken nose and a couple teeth missing. Blood everywhere. He didn't know that his sister was a dancer, so he went to the club to IDK. Must have wanted to talk to her or something, or to take her back home. Anyway, he gets there and asks for her, and they tell him she's busy, but he hears her voice talking to the guy she's with. The guy turned out to be one of his friends, and the brother got so mad that his friend was seeing his sister like this that the brother punched the guy in the face. The girl must have ended her shift then, because as we were getting ready to leave, she had changed back into her clothes and was leaving with her brother. This is some GTA mission type shit. Former sex worker here. I worked as an escort in a smallish city for many years and showed my face in my advertising to prevent these kinds of awkward encounters. My partner at the time knew that I was an escort and was very supportive. One day a guy who worked with my partner booked me without recognizing me. We'd met at some work drinks a few weeks before and I chatted with him and his wife for an hour or so, but I probably looked quite different out of context. I recognized him immediately and explained that we'd met before without explaining how I knew him. To protect my partner's privacy, I said that we're likely to run into each other again as we ran in the same circles and he'd really appreciate not having slept together should that happen. He was perplexed, but keen to hang out for the hour and relax platonically just to get away from work. About a month later he showed up at my partner's birthday drinks. The penny dropped and he actively tried to avoid us both. Haha. I slept with their former boss as well, who I recognized but he didn't recognize me. Also slept with an ex-boyfriend's brother. We didn't recognize each other but he mentioned his very specific family dynamic and I realized I'd met him at his family Christmas a few years beforehand. For about a year before I became a mother, I made and sold content. I wasn't really a camgirl because all my business was done privately, but my best customer was one of my best friends from high school. He was a sweet kid, just a little socially awkward. It was a great experience honestly. At first I felt a bit bad about having him pay me, but he was more than happy to do so. He's also the only person I sold to while being pregnant because I did not love my pregnant body, but he made me feel a bit better about myself. We still talk. It's been little over a year since his last purchase. He is still one of my best friends, and if he asked I would more than likely still sell him content because he was always so appreciative and wouldn't accept free content. I'm very grateful I have a friend like him. That's incredibly wholesome. Throwaway. This happens a lot. My ex would hire girls for threesomes, for birthdays etc, and there were a few girls we got to know pretty well. And yes, it happens both by accident and on purpose when people find out the sort of work they do. From what I gather it's awkward, but a job's a job. Okay, so the beats are actually on sale this week for 69 cents a pound. Oh, 69. You know, like last weekend we. Goddammit Carl. This is Wegmans and I'm on the clock. So most sex workers screen our clients. That means we have their personal info to run a background check and make sure we're not about to get arrested or murdered. It also eliminates the chance of a creepy friend trying to secretly book us. I was a stripper and a bunch of rich banker guys come in. They want me to be their dancer, and I was thrilled. I spent my shift being as lewd as the rules allowed for them and got a great tip for my trouble. Fast forward to the next day, we go to my boyfriend's dad's bank president house and there's a pile of people I recognized. Presumably they saw pictures of me and recognized me at the club. Thankfully, they said nothing to BF's dad, but they'd have me be their private stripper for the night once or twice a week. I think they were trying to spite BF's dad. Why isn't this a long form story on Literotica? I'd read that. This is a really interesting one and thanks for sharing. When I was young and dealing with a drug addiction, I sold myself to get money to sustain this. One day I had 3 costumers. They messaged me and we met up where they planned. One picked me up with his car, one at his apartment, and the last one also picked me up by car. I take a look at him, and it was my friend's father. He was single, and didn't know I was the hostess. It was a bizarre night. I haven't told my friend and things are just as normal. We haven't had another meeting after that. I hope you're doing better now. I am indeed. I am clean from drugs. Haven't done anything for months. I am out of sex work, except making porn with my lovely man. But that is just a hobby, and I have a solid income. I hope you are doing well too, no matter what you have faced or currently are facing. Years ago when I was a stripper, my cousin's husband came in. When I went by his table to thank one of the guys he was sitting with, he said hi, slipped me a $100 and said, "You never saw me here." I just laughed and said, "I won't tell if you don't." It was kind of awkward. He never told, and I kept his secret even when family found out, and his wife said some really beachy things to me about the questionable morals of anyone who would work at or go to that type of place. Sex workers aren't going to accidentally go up to their relative's hotel room like in the movies. Stop asking me to say what are you doing. Step bro, you're my dad. This is so wrong. My good friend used to work in a local brothel. There's a TV in their staff lounge area playing the live security footage of clients entering. So if they see a friend or relative come in, they don't have to file out with the other girls for the selection lineup. I once attempted to solicit a sex worker, and it turned out to be somebody I knew. They were recommended by a friend, so there was no picture. Since we both used aliases, did not recognize each other's names. Well, did you went through with it? I did some stripping back in the day. All was well until my high school stalker from another state showed up in the club. I was drunk and he was in a business suit, so I gave him a chance and he came back to my place. Nothing ever happened, we just went to sleep, but it was the worst thing I could have done. He wouldn't leave the next day. When I managed to get rid of him, he wouldn't stop texting and calling me. I told him I didn't want anything to do with him and he just wouldn't leave me alone. He believed we were brought together for a reason. It took moving 5 Facebook accounts and a few number changes later until he finally got the hint. FCK, now that type of insistence is very scary. On the opposite side of this, I once saw a crush of mine from HS stripping. We were 19-20ish at the time. I think she got super embarrassed because not only my group of friends were there, most of whom knew who she was, there was also a separate group of friends there that were from the same grade in high school. When she came around, her face was red and she said, "I'm being good, I'm going to college." I replied, "I'll help," as I slid some cash into her panties. I still think about that interaction sometimes. I hope she's doing well. That's a legendary one-liner TBH. I managed a car dealership and had a beautiful 17-year-old girl working as my floor receptionist. She stayed on for about 4 years while she went through university. A few years after I moved on from that store, I brought my nephews into a well-known strip club for their first visit at about 21 and 24 years old. There she was. The lead dancer was my old receptionist and looking as amazing as ever. She saw me and ran up and gave a big hug and kiss. Then gave us VIP treatment all night. Uncle's street cred is still at the charts. Peas. She also worked as a Budweiser ring card girl for big pro fights. I stripped for years in my hometown. I knew a lot of people. I have had many of my customers be friends, visible community professionals, some friends' parents, etc. It never bothered me, and unless they acknowledge it first, I don't bring it up. I didn't do anything wrong. Lost my scholarship in college due to failed grades because I had to supplement whatever financial support I was getting from the scholarship to support my family by working. I'm fairly attractive and actually a little charming, so I tried getting into the sugar baby daddy business. Made an account on Seeking Arrangement, and after a few failed attempts at getting a legitimate sugar daddy, I finally found one. He had no pictures on his account, but he seemed legit and he agreed to meet in a restaurant for dinner, so I did not have any reservations going to meet him despite not having seen his face. I go to the restaurant and it's my intro to Matt C. Professor. He says he recognized me from the mole on my cheek. He calls it a beauty mark. He's still my sugar daddy until now, 1 year later. I went through this from the other angle. Back in college, my fiance was out of town with her mother. I was gifted a ticket to the gentleman's club across the highway from the college in town and figured this to be the best weekend to give it a shot. Long story short, about the third girl to come out dancing was doing the whole head swirly thing and looked down and then whipped her head up, hair back, and we locked eye contact. At the same time we both said, "Don't tell." Fiance. Yeah, my fiance's best friend was a stripper and nobody knew. My bizzle friend was getting married to his wife a few years ago. For his bachelor party we hired a male stripper for him, as his farewell package. We thought the wordplay was just excellent. All of us friends are straight guys, so instead of picking out a stripper for him we just called up an agency, told them the situation, and they sent someone. That someone was his stepbrother that he doesn't really get along with. It was pretty awkward. He was more professional than I think any of us expected him to be. He called the agency and they sent someone else over within an hour. A woman this time who was not in any way related to anyone there. They apparently have a bit of a better relationship now. The awkwardness and embarrassment of the situation gave them something to bond over a little. SZs of Reddit. What's the SZest SX you've ever SZ'd? Not a SZ, but I heard about a SZ who SZ'd so hard that they SZ'd their SX off. Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth SZ the Coon? I thought not. It's not a story your wife would tell you. It's a SX legend. Darth SZ was a SZ lord of the Kumas, so powerful and so enormous he could use his gaze to influence the eggs to create life. He had such a knowledge of positions that he could even keep the ones he cared about from stopping. The SZ side of the SX is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be hot. He became so powerful, the only thing he was afraid of was losing his virginity, which eventually, of course, he did. Unfortunately, he taught his son everything he knew, then his son redacted him in his sleep. Ironic. He could save others from peaking, but not himself. I went to a strip club in the city. Mind you, this was my first time going to one and I found out my neighbor was a stripper. She just saw and smiled at me. My wife was a stripper back in the 80s and 90s. One day her gin came in, he tipped her $100 and they had a good laugh. I used to be a stripper and one night at work I turned around and locked eyes with my very Mormon and surprisingly very wasted aunt and uncle. I ran into my customer at a strip joint. I was working at a bank and had a regular customer who was a pretty cool dude. I went out one evening to a club and I ran into him there. We saw each other across the room and exchanged awkward glances. Laughed a bit. After that, I didn't see him again. LOL. I've ran into a lot of people I knew. A few that graduated from my high school. Friends from the bar I also worked at. Friends from basically everywhere, LOL. But the weirdest one was my second cousin. We just acted like we never saw each other at the next Christmas and he would always leave and go outside when I would go on for a set. So awkward. Not a worker but a client whenever I'm single. Had my eyes on a really gorgeous girl in high school. We cross paths every once in a while when I was working a job at the local grocery store. We would chat a bit and that was it. She was part of the popular crowd but was always super nice. Then one day I was shopping for a girl when I recognized her, but she obviously seemed older since high school was like 20 years ago, but still just as gorgeous. I asked her if the pictures from her ad were really her. Happens a lot that the girl advertised isn't really the person you're gonna get. We call that bait and switch. And she says yes. So I book her. She opens the door still just as gorgeous as before, but she just treats me like she doesn't recognize or know me, so I play with it. After we were done she tells me the age she put online wasn't her real age, to which I reply, I know how old you are. We went to high school together. Double angle quotation mark. She didn't recognize me or remember me at all. She had many bad things happen related to some mental illness like depression or something like that. She went nuts one time and drove the opposite way on the highway during some sort of episode. Went to see her again a couple more times after that. I had a really cool math engineering teacher in HS who told me a story about the first time he ever went to a strip club. His wife convinced him to go as a date or something, which I thought was really weird. So they went up to the thing where like the main stage is. I've never been to a strip club, so I don't know what the terminology for things are, and looked up. The performer was one of his former students, not just like a random student, but one of the high achieving good students too. He said this was his one and only strip club experience, and I can understand why. My wife and I are good friends with a few burlesque dancers. Before COVID hell, we'd go to their shows all the time to support them. They even did a private show for us before our wedding. It's only weird if you make it weird. I advertised my OnlyFans account on my Facebook and quickly learned which of my friends have crushes on me. I don't mind them following though. You really don't give a shit, do ya? Bro, you actually watched the whole video. I'd give you a high five if I was a human. Make sure to click the like button and subscribe for more great content. See you next time.